More than 3 years have passed since the blockade of Qatar by the 4 Arab states of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt. With no resolution in sight, pieces of information that come out every now and then are all indicative of high tensions among Washington's key Arab allies. The most recent and at the same time the most shocking revelation is about the Saudi-led UAE-funded plot to invade neighboring Qatar in the early days of the blockade.
الحادث اللي حدث مؤلم جدا لجميع السعوديين.
In early August, the American news publication Foreign Policy revealed in detail that King Salman of Saudi Arabia had called Donald Trump to get permission for invading Qatar on June 6, 2017, only 1 day after the imposition of the blockade. Although the U.S. president offered his full-throated support to the Saudi-led campaign, the idea of a military invasion was a flagrant violation of international law. But it was, according to The Intercept, the efforts of Rex Tillerson, then U.S. Secretary of State, that dissuaded the Saudis and their ilk from attacking Qatar. And it was exactly the same efforts that cost Tillerson his job.
We call on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt to ease the blockade against Qatar. There are humanitarian consequences to this blockade. We're seeing shortages of food, families are being forcibly separated, and children pulled out of school.
Frustrated by Tillerson's attempts to mediate, the blockading countries lobbied hardest for his removal. According to the New York Times, the UAE ambassador to Washington knew that Tillerson would be put aside 3 months before he was fired in March 2018.
As these details come out over time, gives us more of a sense of what the Saudis were prepared to do, and also some of the internal politics on the American side. In particular, I think it is showing what kind of influence the Saudis have over Washington and its policies, and even over its personnel.
According to the leaked invasion plan, Saudi ground troops were supposed to cross the land border into Qatar. With military support from the UAE, they would advance about 70 miles toward Doha, the capital city of Qatar. And finally, after passing Al Udeid Air Base, which includes about 10,000 American soldiers, the Saudis would then take control over Doha. The Saudis were going to mount the military invasion despite the fact that their campaign against Yemen had already turned out to be a complete fiasco.
I think if you add that to the megalomania of Mohammed bin Salman, who thinks he can do this successfully despite the lesson of Yemen, that there is a certain addiction to the idea of power. There's a myth of invincibility, perhaps, that's been built up in bin Salman's mind, that he can attack other countries. Remember, Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest spenders on military hardware on the planet. I think they may actually be third, right after the United States and China. So maybe he feels that all this hardware actually buys him a certain amount of invincibility, even though the performance has not really showed that.
After the foreign policy revelation, Doha waited a day for the Saudis to issue an official denial of the invasion plot before announcing its shock. In a series of tweets, Ahmed bin Saeed Al Ruhaimi of the Qatari Ministry of Foreign Affairs lashed out at the Saudis for their interventionist tendencies. The fact that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has not yet denied what the American magazine revealed indicates the truth of the matter. which is something extremely dangerous to the security and stability of the region. Al-Ruhaimi also described the invasion plot as another nail in the coffin of the Persian Gulf Cooperation Council, which was originally based on collective security. In fact, the plot casts light on the darker side of the two Arab powers. Both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have shown again and again their desire to use military force in everyday politics.
A resort to war is very high on the list of the Saudis' way of looking at the world and looking at their neighbors. And I think this actually dovetails with their very strong support for international terrorism. They point the other finger at other countries like Iran, but they're actually the primary culprit in this regard.
By many reliable accounts, the invasion plan was at least partially driven by financial problems the two countries are grappling with. From the time Salman came to the throne as the Saudi king in 2015 to the time he decided to invade Qatar, the kingdom spent more than a third of its $737 billion in reserves. Conquering Doha would potentially swell the Saudis' coffers by taking control of the North Field of natural gas. In the words of Abdullah bin Hamad Al Attiyah, former Qatari Minister of Energy and Industry, an idea came to them to solve their gas problem by invading Qatar and occupying the largest gas field in the world, and it could suffice them for 200 years. It would provide them with billions of dollars by laying a pipeline from the North Field to Saudi Arabia, and then by selling the gas on the global market.
Qataris, because of their natural gas interests in the Gulf, have a working relationship with Iran. And that is something that the Saudis don't like. And in fact, they covet those gas resources in Iran. They would like to add those gas resources to their portfolio to add to their petroleum holdings.
The invasion plan, no matter how shocking, is not unprecedented. In fact, the tiny but gas-rich and, in the eyes of Riyadh, recalcitrant state of Qatar has always been coveted by and a concern for its neighboring kingdom. In a May 2017 email thread with former U.S. diplomat Elliot Abrams, the Emirati ambassador to the U.S., Yusuf Al-Utaiba, wrote, "Conquering Qatar would solve everyone's problems, literally." And King Abdullah of Saudi came pretty close to doing something in Qatar a few months before he passed in January 2015.
I think there are several reasons why Riyadh is very hostile toward Qatar. To start with, it's understood that Saudi Arabia is the local hegemon of the pro-American camp in the Gulf region. Other states like the UAE and Bahrain largely take their cues from Riyadh. The fact that the Qataris who also have a very good relationship with the United States and even host an American base there, are not under the thumb of the Saudis, I think is very offensive to the Saudi.
As far as leaked documents indicate, the idea of invading Qatar by the four current blockading countries dates back to 1996. According to Paul Burrell, the leader of a French mercenary group, he was hired to lead a coup against the Qatari ruling family in 1996. But the coup was brought to a standstill after the then French President Jacques Chirac asked him to stop the operation, telling him to, quote, "stop committing anything foolish." The Saudi-led invasion of Qatar has not happened so far for the complexity of the situation and its far-reaching consequences, but it has clearly shown the rusty mentality of the Saudis and their all-weather allies that put war and bloodshed before peace and diplomacy.
الحادث اللي حدث مؤلم جدا لجميع السعوديين.